now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Magic Mics. We're going to get started, as we do each and every week, by introducing my two co-hosts, Ruben Bressler.
How are you tonight?
Aaron Campbell.
Good evening.
Aaron.
Is that
you
look different.
That's
You like
weird.
that?
You did something. You did got a manicure, didn't you? That's what happened.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. It's,
Okay, perfect.
Something nice with your hair.
All right.
Thank you. Do you like that?
All right. Aaron Campbell.
Hi.
Thank you very much for joining us, guys. And you at home for watching us. Here we are. We're going to talk about the big first pick in Magic. What's everybody talking about this week? And it is Lands won the Grand Prix Seattle from Jarvis Yu. And Lands won, and Christian Calcano got second place, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations, him.
Just two heroes in the final.
Absolutely. And but there was something a little different that happened in round 3, I believe it was. And Ruben, could you give us a little synopsis on the man now known as Wasteland Carl?
Sure. So my new hero, and really the hero that Magic deserves,
Yes.
is a guy named Carl, who was who's on camera playing against Brian Brown-Duin in round 3 coverage of Grand Prix Seattle, and he was playing a deck that had a Wasteland in it, and he elected to not use the card that he had in play for a few turns, and to his detriment, lost the match as a result. Partially from that, and also partially because he was playing against Brian Brown-Duin, who's like 1 GPs. So, and he was just getting slaughtered in Twitch chat, as you do when you're in Twitch chat.
Well, of course.
Sometimes you just get beat up. But, yeah, so basically he was getting beat up, and then instead of sort of going into a cocoon and being like, oh, don't make fun of me, I don't want to be in the public spotlight anymore, he created an AMA and has embraced this new meme of himself being Wasteland Carl. He's like taking it all in stride, and it's super awesome to see. This guy's just he's my new hero. He's just great. People that can take a joke, I love. People who take themselves too seriously, I just can't stand.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing.
This guy's.
It's one thing. I mean, again, you do something bad or whatever. You do something that's somewhat embarrassing. A lot of people are just going to run. They're going to run as far as they can from what just happened. Like, don't talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. It happens in the past, whatever. But no, the embracing, that's what's cool. It's just, when you turn that on its head, all of a sudden it becomes something that's really cool. And he needs to get twitter.com/wastelandcarl literally immediately, if someone hasn't already done so, just to troll, as they do. But yeah, so Aaron, your thoughts on Wasteland Carl?
I just found out who he was tonight. I watched a lot of the GP. I was in Twitch chat, and I was dumber by osmosis for doing so. But I couldn't figure out why Carl kept coming up, and like chat was just spamming it constantly. And I was like, I thought it was like the new Paul. Like when Paul Chien comes on, it's immediately just Paul. But there was no Carl, and every time I would ask, I wouldn't get an answer. And I just found out like an hour ago, and I think that's cool. Like you said, Twitch chat can be ruthless. I know there was a Dredge player who was facing LSV in the last round of the first day that was just, made a bunch of misplays, and it was, how could you do this? What was he thinking? LSV should have won. And yeah, like you said, it would have been really easy for someone to really marinate on that and be like, what did I do? I'm so terrible. But he's like, you know what? If I can turn this into a positive, if I can get, 15 minutes of fame out of this, I'm going to do that. And I'm not mad at it. I think it's cool.
I think
he's
that's
excellent.
Great.
And the photo of him proving that he's Wasteland Carl should be a meme. It should be a thing. It needs to be. Look, I don't know who creates the emotes for the various channels, but if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, that needs to be a meme for the official channel.
Well, remember,
I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, you got like 16 or 32 pixels, man. Like you don't have a lot of space.
The Kappa face is a thing, right?
Kappa face is a
thing.
Yes.
Did you see the Planeswalker card with him on it?
I did not see
the
Planeswalker.
It's only like 2 activations. It's so funny.
Oh my god.
I think it was a Planeswalker. Yeah.
He's unbelievable, and if you can turn that into a thing, and like you can be like Wasteland Carl and type that into as an emote,
right?
God, I just would be the happiest person.
That is fantastic.
No one deserves to have that positivity more than him for how he's taking it on the chin here.
Yeah.
Sure. All right, so we're going to move on here to our Desperate Ravings. The Desperate Ravings is, we got a few topics. We got a couple. The first is a parody Twitter account that I absolutely love. As soon as I found out about it, I thought it was terrific. And it is twitter.com/Bob Ross Magic. Is that correct? I'm double checking this.
I think so.
No, Magic Bob Ross.
It's Magic Bob Ross. Yeah,
Checking.
it's great. It's just a
Magic.
delightful.
Yeah, twitter.com/Magic Bob Ross. It is just so cool. I mean, sometimes you want to counter a spell and draw a card. Sometimes tap their team and bounce. Whichever way works for you is the right way. It's one of those, if you watch Bob Ross, which by the way, it was a terrific program, and I used to watch it back in the day when I got home from school. But now he takes this sort of this incredible, unbelievable sincerity and just earnestness that you just don't really see. It's one of those things that is so earnest you feel like it's unreal, like it's comical, like he's trying to make fun of you, but he's not. And that's what's so endearing about Bob Ross is he has these things, and we're just tapping some happy little lands here. That's all we're doing.
Yep. Sometimes you just have to cast that spell into those 2 untapped islands. Are you ready? This is our bravery test. It's just like, I watched a lot of the Bob Ross. So recently, Bob Ross was his entire 25-26 season run was played back to back on Twitch to launch their creative channel.
Yeah.
You can go to the homepage of Twitch and look at the various channels of, there's StarCraft, there's Overwatch, there's Magic, there's talk shows, there's poker, there's creative now. And when you go to the creative channel, there are things like people creating cosplay or doing Adobe Photoshop art or things like that. Mm-hmm. And to launch the channel to help celebrate that, one of the original Learn With Me series was PBS with Bob Ross. And he had such a passion for art that it's just to this day it's addictive to watch. It's contagious. His enthusiasm is amazing. He was so sincere that he's such a perfect target for this kind of parody, because I just love it. Aaron, not so much though. Not
Aaron,
a big fan.
we're not so much in here.
I'm not mad at people for enjoying it. I admit that I don't see the appeal necessarily. Like, I didn't watch the Twitch streams, and I didn't, get into it the way that people did. But I'm amazed. I think you kind of broke it down. Like, I admit I didn't understand what the secret was. Like, it looks so innocuous to me, where it's like it's a guy painting. Like, what's the I could understand if somebody liked that, but the phenomenon that it had become, I was just like, what? I don't understand. And I think Twitch has agreed that it's going to be every Monday night now. There's going to be more. Either I don't know. I heard he passed away. He
passed away many years ago.
Okay,
but something happened with the rights of this show. I don't know exactly when, but it felt like, because all of his episodes are now on YouTube. You can go to YouTube and find every single one, watch every single one. It's great, and it's fascinating because he's a great teacher, and it's really cool how he kind of puts all of his paintings together. But again, it's really just about this. It's just such a feeling of his enthusiasm. It's very almost Mr. Rogers. It's like you just feel better having hung out with that guy for any length of time.
If we are gonna bring anything back from the zeitgeist, I'd really like to see unsolved mysteries. Like, if you give me 30 hours of that on Twitch, I'm there.
We can bring that back too. It's not an either or situation.
Oh, right. Totally.
The other thing I want to point out about the Twitch stream in particular, there's a great article called "Twitch's Bob Ross Marathon is the most beautiful thing the internet has ever created," which I'll link in the chat here.
That's pretty lofty.
It's a lofty sentence, and it's a guy who grew up in England, so he didn't really have the Bob Ross to grow up with. But now that he started watching Twitch and everyone viewing it together and enjoying it together, it was a beautiful little situation. And now all these Magic players can join in together on these on the Bob Ross Twitter account. I just think it's when you create a good parody account, there haven't been many in Magic. It's very difficult to get a really good parody Twitter account.
Right.
But this is a quality one. Plus, they're using Eric Klug art as the profile pic, so...
Yes, absolutely, which is fantastic. Eric Klug's the best. And so, Bob Ross is just... it's just one of those great things that you can just hang out and watch him paint and listen to him and be inspired and just feel good about yourself. It's just one of those... Such a unique dude.
There are no misplays, Aaron. Only happy accidents.
I love it. All right, so on the screen, I'm going to bring up...
Let's give that forest a friend.
That's what we do. That's
Everyone
what we
needs
do
friends.
here. Everybody needs friends. Aaron, if you haven't watched Bob Ross, you should watch Bob Ross, at least a little.
I admit I watched like 13 minutes, and it was too... I got a
It's
toothache.
calming.
It was
It's
too...
so calming for
soothing.
the soul.
Yeah, man.
It makes you feel... I fell asleep.
I'm a ginger. I don't
listening to it.
have a soul.
He is
That's
definitely...
fair.
He's the chicken soup for the soul, at least as close as
really
we've
is.
had it in terms of... Again, I think ever since Mr. Rogers, it's a very similar feel to me.
Yeah.
So, on the screen... I'm going to bring up a little something from the Wizards Play Network. Now, this is this is very retailer facing. However, for those of us who play competitively, it is very important. There's a new policy on combining premier events. And just to note, because Helene Bourgeau answered this on Twitter, this is only for events that have yet to be scheduled as of that date, November 10th. But from all of those events being scheduled forward, there is going to be no WPN Premier events. These are PPTQs or Grand Prix trials that have third-party event with a third-party event and advertise it as a single tournament with a combined prize pool. That means you're not going to have an IQ with a PPTQ. You're not going to have a TCG player qualifier with a Grand Prix trial. You're not able to put these things together any longer. And it was a big deal when they were able to be combined. Now it's a big deal that they're going to be kind of separated. So you can, of course, run them in tandem. You could run an IQ and you could run run a PPTQ.
But across the room, they can't be the same event.
Never the twain, as it were.
Never the twain shall meet.
That's correct. Yes.
This was a big problem for my roommate, Eric Froelich, actually, relatively recently for SCG States.
Yeah.
Was combined with a PPTQ, and he wasn't allowed to play because Efro is a Platinum Pro, Player of the Year,
Right.
excellent,
Hall of
top-notch
Famer.
Magic player, but wanted to try to get an SCG invitational slot because he's not qualified for those.
Right.
So he wanted to play in Vegas, his hometown, wanted to play in the SCG IQ, but wasn't allowed to enter because it was also this other event.
Wow.
And he was like, but I want to enter this. I don't want the other thing. I don't need the PPTQ. I can just concede in the finals or whatever if I get that far. And they're like, no, you can't enter. You're not eligible. Right? So it's actually a real tangible problem for, a small subset of the population.
Sure.
But the small subset of the population is quite noisy, right? And you want you want Efro to be playing in TCG qualifying events, in SCG qualifying events. You want them to want to come out to the local game stores and be excited to play in these local events. And when you combine events like this, it's nice for players like me and like mid-level grinders who are like trying to get the most value for their buck, right? Oh, if I win this event, I get an invite and a PTQ? Wow, that's great. That's great value. But by the same token, you're cutting out a segment of the population. And so even though it's not a huge change in terms of how many people it will affect, it's a big change in terms of the direction in which premier events, I think, are headed, right? In that, I think that you're going to see more of these big weekends combining lots of different events rather than trying to combine everything into one event at one local game store. Maybe that one local game store will have a weekend celebration kind of thing. Maybe.
Aaron?
Yeah, I've experienced this with one of my local game stores. They used to combine the IQs with other things. And, I've never been somebody who really plays for, the most EV. Like, I mean, I will play an event if the prize support is not great. But, so the fact that there was an event near me, I was playing regardless. But there were people that were coming down because they assumed they were getting an IQ's prize support, when in reality, you weren't really getting that. And GPTs, if I'm understanding correctly, are kind of on their last gasp anyways. Like, people who want the buys will typically go the day before the GP and just grind out those last chance.
They've been on their last legs for years.
It's
forever.
What I'm saying, though, is if you have to, I'm agreeing with that. What I'm saying is if they have to tie them into these other things just to get people to come, maybe they should just abandon that option completely then. Like GPTs, they were cute for a while. That's nice. We moved on. And you don't have to do that to get people to come out.
I mean, I'm not saying that GPTs always felt like, even as a player, years and years ago when I would play in those things, they just felt almost meaningless. They felt like this weird, fun type of thing. Like, if you're going to the Grand Prix, I don't need to win this Grand Prix trial in order to get me there. And they've always just seemed ho-hum. I mean, it's like, all right.
Well, it's always awkward too when you got to like the top 8 and like you're playing against somebody and they're very open, like I'm not even going, and it's like, well, what? But move over and let me have the buys then. And that was always a really awkward conversation too.
Exactly.
So I'm a value hound. I do like having all of the events tied into one. But the other thing that's interesting about this is now that you have to run 3 different events, you have to hire more judge staff or tournament organizing staff, right? Or you have to have more people available.
Right.
Your store hours are going to have to be possibly longer, right? Because you're running more events. It's at least more man hours in one level or another. And so that's a little bit interesting for me. It might cost the stores a bit more money in that sense. But by the same token, if they're holding 3 events, they might get more money, right? So it's an interest. I'm not a business person. I'm not a business scientist. So I don't know what this means in terms of making money for the local game stores.
Sure, I just think it's important for, at least in terms of the players, to say like, well, now these things aren't stacked anymore. Now these things have to be spread apart. A PBTQ is just a PBTQ and can be whatever that PBTQ needs it to be. Grand Prix trials,
right?
Whatever.
Magic events are no longer using the stack. They are now in batches.
Yes, they're now using fast effects.
Back batches.
We're going to go, nice. We're going to go to Gathering the Townsfolk. And we had a loss in the community. And there was a really nice, there was a really nice eulogy written for Mike, also known as NVBeast, as it were, if I'm pronouncing that anywhere close to correct. And one of his teammates from the Norwegian area wrote it, and he was talking about how Mike was the creator of MTGcoverage.com. And if you haven't ever been to MTGcoverage.com, you are missing out, because you should see an incredible, amazing resource for watching live Magic, live high-level play. A database that is completely linked within itself, where you're able to see all of the matches by a certain person, all of the matches that feature a certain deck, all of the events in chronological order. You can slice it, you can dice it. It is absolutely amazing what this website has done. And it's also one of those websites that, once you know of it, and then once you get used to it, and once you use it, you can't imagine a world that we don't have this type of resource. You can't say, this should have been here. Why wasn't, it obviously should be there.
Right. When you see it, it's so obvious, right? Yeah. It's like, there are very few times that a website that's just so unique, but like obvious, like how did this not always exist?
Right.
There are very few examples of that. We discussed a few weeks ago the new blog network
on the Meadery?
On the Meadery, where that's the kind of thing that this is like. Puka Trade is another example of how did this not always exist. MTGMom.com was a good example of this before that, of course, became defunct and then was later replaced by Yu-Gi-Oh! Dad and other sort of events as an event calendar. How have we not always had an easily sortable event calendar? Well, now, how have we not always had an easily sortable MTG coverage database where you get all of last week's coverage and all of last year's coverage? You can type in a format, you can type in a deck, you can type in a player's name. Type in Evan Irwin, by the way. It's great. The one match that he's played of Magic in the last 2 years on camera.
Oh my God.
It's not to be missed.
Is not.
And spoiler alert, he wins. So, good record, buddy.
Scoreboard. All I'm saying.
Yeah, of course. And Mike is, I never met him. He lived in Norway. He was a member of Mist Trigger Gaming in Norway. He seems like he was very active in the live scene as well. He would show up to the events and be a fixture on the live scene as well. And he passed away on November 6th, I believe, of a battle with cancer. And it's a real sad day for the community that someone who created something so unique and something. I have very few bookmarks. Because I try to keep a clean brain. I don't want to have too many tabs open inside my head, right? But this is one that you just need, and once you start using it, you don't stop using it. And Mike changed the format of how you view Magic coverage, and as someone who has been in Magic coverage a lot, I'm very grateful for it. So,
Aaron?
Well, unlike Ruben, I have a very dirty brain. So when I
oh God.
So when I find a deck that I love, I just want to absorb every piece of information about that deck. Like if you were to look at my Chrome right now, you would see an ad nauseum folder, you would see a Jund folder, you would see a Dredge folder. I have, every post, forum post, video I can find. And so for somebody like me,
Wow.
being able to click, I know. So being able to click Dredge and see every feature match that's been done with Dredge is really big for somebody like me. And I can watch those and I can learn. If you follow a particular pro, like I'm a big fan of Reed Duke, you can look at everything Reed's ever done, vintage, standard, by format. It'll tell you what that person was playing at the time, who they were playing, and what their opponent was playing. And it's all right here. You don't have to go through YouTube and click on like the 34th page and weed through some infomercials to find the video. It's all right here. This is amazingly comprehensive. And even in terms of decks, if I click Dredge, it'll give me Manaless Dredge, Golgari Dredge, Standard Golgari Dredge, and it's just like variations of the deck I didn't even know existed. So I'd never heard of the site before tonight, but I will certainly be using this because I'm sure I've missed some things.
Yeah.
With the decks that I look up. I'm like, oh, there's an ad nauseum feature match I've never seen before. I'm on it.
Sure.
There you go.
And I spoke with Mike a little bit a couple years ago, and just a great guy, super positive, does great work. He showed me some of the version 2 stuff, the stuff that is on MTG Coverage now, where you can click on somebody's name and see all their stuff, where you can click on the deck name and see all their stuff. That stuff wasn't in the original, in the original website. It was just like, here's all the matches and they're, done chronologically and you can find them and they're still one click away, but there wasn't the interconnected tools that he created and worked so hard for. And, I just think he did an amazing job and he will be missed and his work continues on. The one thing he wanted, his buddies to do was to keep that running, and, they're doing a fantastic job, and it's a sad day, and it's worth noting.
Cancer sucks.
It affects us all, and it is difficult that the creator of something so unique and so important has passed on, but the fact that his creation will live on, can continue to be updated, and coverage of the Mist Trigger Gaming Open Series in Norway is also going to be continued, so please look that up. Mist Trigger Gaming Open Series on Twitch. I believe that they have some VODs as well. So
nice. Well, there you go. So Mike, it was fantastic, and we appreciate what you did. Yeah. All right, so we're going to move on to the Red Zone, where MTG Goldfish posted an interesting tweet.
This is the MTG Goldfish Radio Hour. This is all this show is.
I know, right? We're just MTG Goldfish fanboys. We'll just get our shirts and just be great. So someone said, they asked MTG Goldfish and Saffron Olive, will the metagame/matchup feature return? Given all the standard champs results, it would be very interesting to see. And Saffron Olive, responded, said, unfortunately, we're no longer publishing metagame/matchup data for Constructed. Someone said, whose decision was it? MTG Goldfish official account said, Wizards asked us to stop publishing the data. And for those who are longtime viewers, this came up at one point between all of us, and I was over here, and as I recall, it was actually on one of his metagame articles, one of his matchup articles. I said, this is not good for Standard. It's not good. It's not healthy. It makes people feel like the format is completely solved, that all of their work is for naught, that they're just waiting for this to turn over so we can move on with our lives, and then we'll analyze another 80,000 matches, and we'll figure out that metagame. And won't that be fun? It's like, but it's not. And what Wizards has done consciously is not post as many deck lists from the Pro Tour, not post as many daily event deck lists. It used to be every daily event deck list was uploaded on the website. Well, they stopped doing that. Why? Because of this exact type of reason. And, you can argue it sort of from a philosophical sense, and that's what we did when I brought this up the first time. But, from Wizards' point of view, at least, and I can imagine from whatever metrics they're getting from the point when they stopped publishing all those deck lists, maybe, I feel like it lends to a more healthy format, and that it can stay that way.
Yeah, agreed. I think that, the battle for information is a weird thing in Magic, right? We live in this information age where you can go back and watch every ad nauseum feature match that's ever been played in the last year and a half, thanks to MTG Coverage and YouTube and Twitch and the zeitgeist. If you go on Twitter, it's sometimes Twitter's faster than Google when you're like, hashtag Kibler Google is much faster than an actual search engine when you're trying to figure something out. Because, they actually did a study on this recently where if you ask somebody over the age of 50 what they would do if they were to research a question, what they would do is they would go look it up in some sort of dictionary app or
Right.
in physical dictionary. Someone between the ages of 30 and 50 or 25 and 50 would use Google. Someone under the age of 25 uses social media to ask the question, to see if anyone that they know knows. And that's a real thing, and that's a shift. And so because of that, it's a weird dynamic you have with Magic, where Magic is at its heart math, right? It's just a bunch of math problems punching heads against each other. And if you can get the right algorithms, or you can figure out the right numbers that work in whatever metagame you're in faster than everyone else, you're going to be ahead of the game, literally, and mathematically. And so they want to sort of stem the tide of that a little bit. And that's tough, you know. When holes in the dam start leaking, you can't just plug them. You can't plug all the holes with. You need more fingers to plug all the holes to keep the information from flowing, right? So you're at this weird crossroads of like, we don't want too much information to come out, but the players crave information. So where's the happy medium there? And it seems that there was too much information coming from Saffron Olive.
Sure.
And you know, we've had this problem in the past with Star City Games and some other issues. You know, other websites have had similar discussions with Wizards, where you know, the removal of all of the daily decks, and now only some daily deck lists get out. The Pro Tour deck lists aren't all published at all times. We've talked about the information battle that is waged at Pro Tours with teams taking notes. Right? These are all things that we've talked about before. This is just another battle in that long war. I don't know that it's a winnable war for Wizards, right?
Well, I don't think it's. Well, one thing is it's to be published and to be online and be available for everybody. Because one of the things that popped up when this was being discussed, I saw was I can't remember exactly who it was, but they said our team would be interested in purchasing this data. If you were to run this data, we would be happy to purchase it. And that's kind of one of those weird things, right? Like, is this something that is going to now be a commodity that they're able to buy and sell and, you know, provide up-to-date info, and how much would you pay for that info and blah, 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 blah? Because, you know, and one of the things they note here is that Wizards could block access. Wizards could just remove replays from Magic Online, because that's where they're getting all their data. They're able to run 80,000 replays. Well, Wizards could just say, well, replays either expire super quickly, or we just don't have them because of what can happen as a result of this data getting out. And, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, everybody craves it, but then nobody wants it, because when they get it, they're like, oh, well, this is the format. Well, I don't like Obs on Aggro, so I don't want to play this format, even though it's the best deck, you know?
Yeah, Wizards wants Magic to be a discovery for everybody. Like, everyone, they don't want you to immediately just go online and be like, what's the best deck? And then everyone play that.
Right.
And then nothing gets discovered ever, right? You know, they don't want it to become, they don't want every city's metagame to be exactly the same. They would like for people to try new things and have metagames develop as the season moves on.
So that's why they created a format with perfect mana where people are simply playing the best cards?
Look,
yeah,
man.
That's how it works.
I mean, I'm just saying, that's the thing that struck me about this. Is like, you know, so you're going to say, not you, but I'm saying them. So they're going to say that all this number crunching is doing terrible things, and it's making people play the best. People are already playing the best deck. There were 10 Abs and Aggro decks in the top 32 of Star Cities Open this past weekend. That's less than 30% of the top 32. Like, that's ludicrous. My friend Hallie built Abs and Aggro online. She's played nothing but Abs and Aggro mirrors. I built red green Eldrazi ramp because you know me, I like decks where I don't really have to
why not?
Yeah. Right, I don't want to interact with you or anything. And I'm facing the same things. You know, I was expecting to get this, and I'm in the tournament practice room. Like, I'm not even in a room where I'm paying. You know, that's normally where you get like the top decks and you're spiking. I'm in the free tournament practice room where I'm expecting to get like some jankiness, and I'm getting Dark Jeskai, Green White, Dark Jeskai, Siege Rhino. I mean, you did this. You made this format where there is no incentive for people to try new decks, and you're going to come out to this website for making the format boring? Girl, please.
Right. Well, I guess we are lumping every Wizards employee together in this discussion. Obviously, the people that create the cards are different than the people who develop the cards.
Yeah.
who want the games to be slightly different, who schedule the events. Like it's a case of the left hand not exactly knowing what the right hand's doing.
Sure.
WotC's a huge company, of course, and so when you create a format, as you say, that has perfect mana, and eventually a lot of the cards are just going to get jammed in decks together, you are going to run into sort of stagnated metagames sometimes, where you just jam all the best cards in the same deck together. It isn't always that way, right? Because green-white Megamorph is still a deck, for example, even though that's just 2 colors, and you find examples like that. The Pro Tour was 3-color decks in the finals, not these 4-color monstrosities that we've been so afraid of. But you're right, the decks that are more synergistic, like the red-green Eldrazi, goblins of years past, the blue-black aristocrats, all these synergy sort of based decks can't really thrive in this good stuff metagame when the mana is so good. And so that is a little bit of a problem.
Right.
But going back to the information battle, figuring out what the best mix of all of those great things are is something that Wizards would want us to do. Usually, you don't figure out the exact numbers of how many Mantis Riders and Siege Rhinos do we play in the same deck together, how many of this, how many of that, how many of each fetch land, how many of each basic do we need, but once one really good player figures it out, and then that's the blueprint, people don't change anymore. A good example of this is when you see a deck win an event, and then the next week, it's like some of the cards are slightly different, but the mana doesn't change at all. That's always funny to me. When people just don't update their lands.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, we took out a Siege Rhino and added another double white spell, but we didn't add another white land. Or whatever. We added Gideons, but we subtracted Jaces, but we still have the same number of blue sources. As an example.
See, that argument I can get behind because, one of the things I've encountered, I was playing a bit of Legacy before this, is, with net decking comes the lack of real understanding for what your deck does. And you see a lot of pros who are content providers who will not write sideboard guides because they feel like that contributes to this feeling of, I'm just going to roll out of bed, copy Jerry T's latest deck, and I'm going to go to a PTQ with this. And people are going, we really want you to, that's great and all, but, one of the things I like to do when I'm feeling particularly snarky is I'll ask somebody, like, so what do you bring that card in for? Like, why is that card in your sideboard? And you'd be surprised how many people are like, and I'm just like, I'm not the best player in the world, but I can tell you like what 15 cards are in my sideboard, why they are there, the specific matchups and whatnot. Right. And I'm always amazed by these people who just have no idea. And like, so if
didn't
this
matter, saw it in a Huey article.
Right. And so if this will kind of cut down on it, if this will make people really think about their choices, then I'm all for that move then, because that's something that drives me up the wall is people who, sort of, I don't know, like how.
Well, you're like, what matchup do you bring this in for? And then like they pull out their printout and they're like, well, he says it goes right here. He says it goes in this matchup.
Someone who's famous for that is Tom Ross. He knows he is just so into the deck comes fully formed out of his brain and he just knows everything about it. Mm-hmm. And it's hilarious because he has all this stuff written out and he can write it out, and then no one else can play his decks. Yeah, right? This happened right at the beginning of a Crowan Crusader mono red aggro. The first of the 2 invitationals that he won back to back.
Right.
There was a conversation that was happening outside when it was like Tom Ross and Jerry T and like some other folks were outside, and Justin Uppel was studying at the feet of the master. Right. He's just asking Jerry T these questions like, I did okay, but I wanted to do better. Maybe my deck choice wasn't great. And Jerry's like, no, your deck choice was fine, but you need to tighten up on this and do this and this. Well, what do you think about John? That deck's good. What do you think about this deck? It's good. What do you think about Esper? It's good. Well, what do you think about the mono red thing? And like glanced over at Tom. I was like, what do you think? Should I have played that deck? And then everyone just is sort of quiet, and Jerry T chuckles a little bit. And Tom hasn't said anything at this point. And Jerry's like, hey, Tom, would you suggest your deck to anybody? And Tom just goes, nah, man, this deck's horrible.
Well, I do want to say, there's nothing wrong with writing down your sideboard notes, because I've certainly done that too, but I still feel like if you're going to do that, though, you should still be able to tell me why it's there, and I feel like, with all this information, there's less of a reason for people to do that, that's all.
Sure. I think my last bit on this is I think that people, and I want to even say R&D is what it kind of feels like to me, is that there's like this deck that no one's found yet, but because all of this work has been done and all this analysis, why even bother? Why even try this weird combination or this weird, strategy? Because it doesn't matter. They've already grounded everything. And when you don't have that there's that sense of discovery. And, and I like it just for me in terms of like what I hope and what I think and what I feel is that, maybe there's formats, maybe, in the world of Bitter Blossoms and Sphinx's Revelations, maybe there was an awesome deck that no one ever built. It was the best thing that no one ever found.
Well, Samstad did that in a recent article. He was talking about with the M14. Yeah, with the M14 that rotated. Yeah. He was like, this was a card that we really thought was going to shake up the format, and then there were cards that were put in to be safety valves for that in case people did clue in the first response, and it never took off.
And that's why Siege Rhino has Trample.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Well, they put in so many safety valves for Lingering Souls in Dark Ascension, for example.
Yeah.
They put in a ton of safety valves for some other cards, and then they just forget some cards, and so certain decks like Mono Black Devotion was a more popular deck than they originally anticipated because they just didn't realize Desecration Demon. Standard Fairies during Lorwyn, they just didn't have Scion of Una in their decks. They just didn't have it. So they thought that these were like perfectly reasonable decks, but they didn't have one key piece that made them dominant, right?
Right.
And so sometimes they just miss things. And the problem with trying to turn off the information valve, I mean, the reason why they're trying to turn off the information valve is so that they don't immediately take over. The problem with turning off the information valve is that you're sort of coming off as a little bit, I don't know how to say this, but you're like trying to withhold information, right? You're trying to be a little bit you're overstepping your boundaries a little bit as the company, right?
Yeah, maybe. It's one of those things that you're trying. I think it's coming from a good place. They're trying to ultimately improve the experience of being a Magic player by not saying like, I want to play blah blah. Well, here's the best deck. Don't worry about looking at anything else ever. Thanks, bye.
Right.
That's what we're doing. Okay, so we're gonna move on here. We're gonna go back to our townsfolk. We're gonna gather some more townsfolk. We thought we were done, but we're not done. I want to talk a little bit about this article. And matter of fact, I want Erin to talk a little bit about this article because this was one that she wanted to bring up. And I'm bringing it up on the screen now. Slow Play, What's the Call, Judge? By Paulo Vitor de Rosa. Erin?
So Paulo wrote this post about slow play, and it's slow play is always a controversial topic. And anytime an event is taking place, I like to click on the hashtag. So I like to click on the GPC tag. I like to click on whatever the GP or the SCG was, and I like to see what's going on there. And it feels like with every event, there's always an issue with slow play where you're watching the stream and you're going, how did this not happen? Or somebody was at the event and they're saying, a warning should have been given out. And Paulo brings up several problems or several main points in his article as to the problem with slow play and how we can deal with it. So problem number one is the stigma of slow play. If somebody tells you that you're playing slowly, people tend to react to it as if you've accused them of cheating. So you tend to feel terrible about that, and he's trying to remove the stigma from it. That, hey, if I tell you to play faster, I'm not saying you're cheating. I'm not saying you're a terrible person, but you do need to kind of step your cookie up a little bit. The second problem is the inconsistency of the slow play warnings. And he posts several videos from matches that he personally has played in, and he was saying, this turn took so many seconds, this person got a warning, but this person didn't. What's the logic here?
Right.
And whether or not there's more to that than just simply the clock ticking down. He brings up a second problem about how judges do not enforce the play warnings early on, but then they will try to compensate later on, and that's sort of inequity. Yep. And he also brings up the fact that oftentimes when a judge tells a player to play faster, usually the opposite happens. And so he brought up the issue from several points, what we as players can do to kind of fix the issue and how we can deal with it, and then how, judges can kind of improve in that department. And I thought this was really good, because this is something that can be really subjective, and so it's something people are really passionate about too.
Yeah, sure. And I've heard, and I've been around judges, and I did some work for the judge program way back when, and I've seen like talks and these chats that they have between themselves, or the stuff that they talk about before tournaments and whatnot, when people bring up things when it's the judge meeting, it's one of those things that it's just, there's not a science. And the other half is, when you're looking at feature matches on SCG Live or on Magic or on Channel Fireball, there is a spotter there who is there to tell what the life totals are and what cards are manifested and all this other stuff. They are not judges. They're not supposed to be judges. They're not meant to be the table judge. Table judges don't exist. Just a spotter exists. You have to maintain the game state. You also have to maintain your state of play. So it is not on them to say it, even though it feels like as a viewer, it's like, well, that's that guy. And sometimes it's a judge, or sometimes it's a judge or someone from the judge program, and you're like, or yeah, there's that person. Forgive me, we'll talk about this in a minute. About, and why aren't they doing something? They're not going. This is slow play. This is killing you. You've been watching this guy fiddle around with his lands and look at the same 3 cards for 2 minutes. It's time to move on. So there's that one half of the problem in terms of feature matches is that there's not a judge there who's trying to keep things moving along because you just can't afford the manpower. The other half is it's just that logistical bit where it's, we're getting towards the end of the round and we got to get moving, and there's these 3 tables who are left playing, and you know what? They're going to be on you, man. That's just kind of how it works. And so it's one of these topics that Paulo brings up, I think, brilliantly, because no one really talks about it. It's a problem that no one really wants to look at because there's no easy answer. Judges aren't going to run around with pocket watches and try to figure out how many, you got 45 seconds for your turn or whatever. There's no set standard. It's always about these feelings and what does it look like and what's the game state. And if he's just looking at a land and he's playing around with his mana or whatever, maybe he's bluffing his opponent, but is that slow play? At which point does it become slow play? You have all these different factors and there's no set standard. And when you get to a realm where, like Magic Online, it has that chess timer. It has that slow play built in. If you play slow, you're going to run out of time and you're going to lose that game. That brings me an interesting point. I think it was BBD who asked the question, I am going to lose, but he's going to lose on time. What do I do? Should I concede or should I let him lose? And I'm like, you let him lose. If that person can't manage their time, done. Look, I'm a Spike. At the end of the day, I want to win. If that guy can't manage his clock because he didn't know what he was doing or he took too much time doing whatever, that's on him, man. I don't care.
Within the rules of the game, which is what you're talking about. Yes. Yep,
exactly. So that's where I kind of come from in terms of that area. It's that Magic Online just doesn't even have this problem in the slightest because they can take as much time as they want and the timer can get them. In the real world, you go to time, you get your 5 turns and all this other good stuff. That doesn't happen anywhere else.
That was very mean old man Irwin of you, just.
You lose. You're
kids
done.
Taking too much time. Multi-queuing. Back in my day, we could only have one window open at a time. You damn hooligans. All right. So I have a couple thoughts on this, which is I personally use the judges to my advantage because it's within the rules of the game. I do not take that sounded weird, but let me explain. Because they're part of the rules, you are allowed to call a judge over to a table if you believe that something is happening that is not in the betterment of the game, right? And that includes your opponent playing slow. I don't take offense personally when my opponents tell me that I'm playing slow or that I've possibly misshuffled a deck or that I have illegal cards in my deck. I don't take offense to that because that's perfectly within their right to call over a judge and make sure that they are safe as a player, right? The big problem is that we need to destigmatize it. This is actually a big problem in poker as well. I want to talk about that a little bit. I was watching a lot of poker the last week, including the main event of the World Series of Poker, which wrapped up last night. There was a player who ended up coming in 5th place named Ofer Zvi Stern, who was taking a long time.
Ofer?
Ofer, O-F-E-R. He's Israeli.
Okay.
He finished.
Cool.
He finished in 5th place. He was taking a long time on all of his decisions, and Twitter was going nuts about it. Like, fans of poker were kind of going a little bit off on this guy. Why is he taking 35 seconds on every hand? They can't all be hard decisions. He's wasting my time. I'll never get this 35 seconds of my life back. Right? That kind of stuff. And there are 2 schools of thought. One is, sure, he's taking more time than other people, but his explanation, which he talked about at a previous poker tournament that took place earlier in the year, was he's not a professional. He wants to weigh all of the options and not look back on his hand and be disgusted with his own play because he didn't think enough. And so he takes his time. He's methodical is a word we throw around, but methodical is the way to describe his play. He did take a lot of time compared to the other players. And it's worse when you're watching it on television. It's a lot worse for coverage because the camera angle shifts so much. You're more acutely aware of time passing when you're watching a match rather than when you're in a match or at the table, right? Yeah. And so when you're in a match, it sometimes feels less immediate, right? When we were watching it on television, we have attention spans of goldfish now, where we want, a different camera angle every 35, more than every 35 seconds. Yeah, we can't handle one thing in a row, one thing at a time. So it's part of the whole culture of viewing sporting events and specifically card games. The last thing I wanted to touch on is something that I've had a lot of discussions. I used to do a lot of soccer refereeing, and this is a discussion that I call yellow card theory, which is when you give a yellow card, the yellow card is easy to give. The red card, some referees are afraid to give.
You're going to have to explain the difference.
Okay. So between what?
A yellow card and a red card.
Okay, the way that it works in soccer is if you're given a yellow card, that is a warning, and a red card is given after a second yellow. And if you're given a red card, you're ejected from the match.
Okay.
Yellow card theory, in my mind, is some referees are afraid to give out a red card on some level. So the first yellow is easier to give out than the second yellow red, right? Sure. And in Magic, that translates to it's very easy for a judge to walk up to a match and say, I need you to make a play.
Sure.
Some judges... And people are afraid of confrontation and are afraid of decisions that could affect an outcome of a tournament or of a match or something like that. I'm not accusing this of anyone in particular, but it is a thing that judges are not all of them are willing to give game losses or give actual punishment other than cautions for slow play. I think that's something that could be changed within the Magic community. I'm not an active judge, but I think that if more attention was paid to actually giving out punishment for slow play, this wouldn't be nearly as big of a problem.
All right, so we're going to move on here to another Aaron-driven topic. And Aaron, before I give my generic white dude response, as we'll call it, I want to bring it up on the screen here. I've brought up the Reddit post of gender inclusiveness and foresight on our spikes. So, Aaron, take it away.
I just want to preface this by saying you mentioned that the highest voted post was a young lady. She's problematic as hell, so she can sit down. So we're not going to use her as a reference point for this at all. Moving on. So there was some moderators on the Spikes thread on Reddit put up a little PSA and encourage posters to use, gender neutral pronouns. Instead of referring to your players as always men, you could say they. So, particularly if you're playing on Magic Online, and you say, he could have had this, or this was his way of doing things, or whatever. They're not really telling people what to do, but they're saying, when you do post on the subreddit, take an extra couple of seconds to consider using they instead of him. And I thought it was really well written. I thought it was pretty friendly. And I think it's a good idea, and it's been something that's been debated in the circles that I run in. And I was just wondering what you two thought about it, and whether or not it's a good idea to you.
Well, in this episode, already, I've used the phrase man hours.
Man hours.
We've used guys.
I use guys.
Evan caught himself in the middle of one of his own soliloquies there, using a non-gender neutral pronoun.
Sure.
This is a subject that is... It plagues many communities, right? Policemen is a thing that is just part of the nomenclature of our society. You're not used to saying police person or fire person, right? It's not just Magic. So this is a bigger cultural thing that we're trying to fix in Magic in particular because, as we've discussed on previous episodes of the show, the tournament Magic scene isn't as inclusive as we might like it to be. Right? That's the general gist of what's going on.
Yeah.
And so, for example, in Magic, manlands is a thing that is not what we want to be using anymore.
Right, and I mean the fact that I've been doing Forgotten Lore, I can tell you that happened when Urza's Legacy came out, because Urza's Legacy, there was Mishra's Factory, and there was Stalking Stones, and that was it. And Stalking Stones never turned back into a land. Mishra's did. So when there was a whole set, there was 5 different ones, and they were all really good. So all of a sudden they became important to a lot of people. That's when this term showed up. And so that was the birth of that cultural term that was used for so many years. Since 1999 has this been a thing. And only recently, only in the past, maybe a couple years, and that's probably being generous, has there been any real look and discussion of, well, maybe they should be creature lands. Maybe it should be her. Maybe she could draw something. Maybe,
And
maybe
there are
that
some
can
examples of this in Magic. For example, if you take the judge test, a lot of the pronouns used are hers in the judge test itself. That doesn't appear in the main portion of the tournament community, though. So there are facets of the community that are trying to make that a thing. But the problem is that when you use a male pronoun, when you say him in any case, it contributes to the feeling that, Magic isn't for us as women, right? And that's the feeling we're trying to avoid here. And so it's just, I don't know how else to really fix it other than to say, to try to avoid situations in which it might even arise. Because using they instead of him or her is problematic for me anyway, because I don't think it sounds correct in my English major brain, right? And so in the future, I would much prefer if you didn't say 3 dudes seriously, Evan.
Right.
That's the real problem I think we have going on here. 3 dudes seriously is we can't
3 persons.
3 people.
Yeah,
seriously.
3 people seriously. That's how it works. But and this is something that's actually happened. It's even come up on the Magic Show when I'm making the Magic Show and I'm saying, oh man, Knight of the Reliquary is an awesome dude. It's a female being portrayed in the artwork, and that's a thing. And it's not anything. Again, I don't mean anything by it, but at the same time, the only way you're able to change these types of cultural mainstays is to change yourself. You got to be the change that you want to see. And so paying attention to that more, like that was something I began to pay, or at least try to pay more attention, even if I kept doing it. And when it was just inadvertent. But again, it's just like man lands versus creature lands. Yeah. If I say man lands, I'm not trying to do anything to the detriment of anything, but I'll also.
Right. Aaron, are you, if we say man lands, if we say 3 dudes seriously, does that make you feel less included in Magic?
Well, the issue isn't whether or not it makes me feel that way. If it makes somebody feels that way, then that's something that needs to be considered. I personally don't mind manlands, but I also didn't mind tranny. There was an issue in the trans community a while back with Drag Race, where there was a segment that was called "You've Got She-Male," and there were people that were very offended by it. And I was a defender of that. Like, I didn't have a problem with it, but I recognized that there were people that had a problem with it. So even though I didn't understand, I still wasn't going to be a jerk to people. And I'm not saying that you two are. But right. you can acknowledge that something doesn't affect you. Like we talked about Good Game. Lee Sharp was like, I don't see the big deal, but I also acknowledge that some people do. And I think that's the important thing. I can say, unlike that lady poster, I can say that I don't have a problem with this, but I understand that people do, and so I will make an attempt to be better. And that's really what it comes down to. And one thing the moderator said that I want to focus on is he said, it's a common thing to do, and it's not the absolute end of the world when it happens. He's right. He's not coming down on people. He's not saying you're all terrible people if you don't do this. He's saying, though, in an attempt to get more people to this thread, which is not, we talked about things just being good business, they want more people to visit. Why is that a bad thing? Their attempt to do that, they're just saying to people, if you don't mind, if you've got the extra 30 seconds to look over what you write, which you should be doing anyways when you post on the internet, come on now, take a look at what you post. And if you can squeeze in these pronouns, hey, that'd be really great. I thought they had a really good attitude about this, because they could have been more firm and they could have been really harsh about it, but they weren't. And so I don't see
this isn't to me like one of those the blah 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 social justice blah blah blah. It's just really about if we can just change a little bit of this, maybe that'll bring even more change. Maybe people will start noticing themselves.
Because it is something people notice. Like
it.
Huey, for example. So Huey kicked ass in coverage this weekend, regardless. But people noticed that Huey was somebody that when he was describing hypothetical situations, he would say she. He'd be like, well, you could be playing with your opponent and she could have this. That's something people notice. Reed Duke, who we all know and love, he does that in his posts as well. He will be describing a situation and he will say, you don't know what she could have in her hand. It really makes you stand out, and it really says says something about you when you try to do something like that, because we're so conditioned to not hear something like that. And I feel like things like that lead to bigger issues.
Sure.
When you're so conditioned, you just don't think anything of it, which can lead to other problems.
I think it's very easy to, as a white male, I'm not someone who's often found in a situation of being uncomfortable in a group. In terms of just social constructs, right? The world is built for white males at this current time in American history. For now, I'm just saying, it's like it's I can only be so lucky to be born white and male and American, right?
Thank you.
So
Thank
there's a couple things that are easier for me, and it's hard to look from the outside back into the box when you're in the box.
Yeah.
And so I don't know best how to handle that situation, because I look at it from the outside and I go, manlands, really? Is that what we're really caring about?
Because my life has absolutely nothing to do with the gender pronouns that you use. I understand that,
right.
and
it doesn't affect me. But if it affects someone,
right,
then I am interested in learning how to make the game. All I want is for the game to grow and to continue being popular, because it's great. So if it's not, I can be like, oh, I don't get it, but it's also no skin off my back if I change my pronouns a little bit. So
thank you. Yeah.
No, and it's all. I mean, it's not that you have to just say, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. You just say, well, maybe if you could just think about when you're talking about these things, keep it in mind. That type of inclusionary language helps. It just helps. Even if even just at the infant, just 1%. If you just use 1%, how many players is that? How many people is that now feeling more included, that they're part of this community, they're part of the game, and it's not just this dude's club thing. It's all people. This
is an easy switch to make. This is not our usual women in Magic conversation, which we've had a couple times on the show.
Sure.
This is something that we can all just do. Absolutely. This is just an easy switch to make. This is just words you use. Words mean things, as Patrick Chapin once famously said, and even pronouns like him, her, they mean things. And so this is an easy switch that I'm willing to make, and I think that is just there's no downside.
All right, so we're going to turn the corner here to the finisher. As we have every single week, the finisher this weekend, over the weekend, Paulo Vitor, Dance Dance Revolution, made a tweet discussion discussing the possibility of playing a Pithing Needle, naming Abandoned Hope, in an unlosable game, for the rub-ins, for the daggers.
Right. He was discussing whether or not it's legal to name a troll card.
Right, to name literally a card outside the format just because it was funny.
Paulo.
Yes.
Right.
So now, Pithing Needle naming Abandoned Hope is an unlosable situation. In an unlosable situation, right, it might be enough of a needling to actually make your opponent concede.
See what you did.
So, given the opportunity, what card would you name in certain game situations, Ruben?
Well, as a big fan of a good troll myself, you know me.
Oh, we do.
The next time I sit down across from Chris Pakula, and I play my Shards of Alara meddling mages right onto the board against Chris Pakula, I'll be sure to give a good pause before I name Forgotten Ancient.
That is shade.
Woo!
And not remembered.
And his face isn't on the card anymore.
Correct.
Yeah, that's how it works. Aaron?
Well, as I am ruthlessly crushing my opponent with Dredge in my next Legacy Daily, I will calmly flashback Cabal Therapy, and in doing so, remind my opponent that Legacy really is a survival of the fittest.
That's right. Hope they're looking at their little chat log over there. Now, if you ever find yourself locked in a match of Magic with either of my co-hosts and really need a good card to name with Phyrexian Revoker, Memoricide, or really just anything, that the correct play is to name Silence, because that's all I want him to do. Just shut up. Shut it. Shut up. Okay.
It's not going to be a very entertaining podcast if we
It's not if we're being quiet. It's fine. But
do this your damn self.
I tell you what. Ladies and gentlemen, that ends another episode of Magic Mics. Thank you guys for being here to join us. You could be anywhere in the world. You hung out with us talking about Magic. Thank you very much, Ruben Bressler.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aaron Campbell.
Thank you.
You are awesome. I want to move on to our outro slide here. And we thank you guys for watching. And we hope that you support us at patreon.com/magicmics, because if you have the level to view the pre-show I'm pretty sure you're getting your money's worth, and anybody who's got it can tell you the same. Otherwise, please follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, and do everything social that tells people that we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv/magicmics, on Twitter at magicmicescast, on Reddit at reddit.com/magicmics, and on Facebook at facebook.com/magicmics. Talk to us privately at magicmicspodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmicspodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.